Well, good morning, real estate fans. This is Alice Lema with Pete Belcastro. We're both brokers at John L Scott Real Estate here in Southern Oregon. We welcome you to our weekly radio show here on News Radio KCMX 880 AM. Good morning, good morning. Pete, what a week. Here we are. We're back in the middle of the coronavirus. How are things doing for you?
Well, I was going to say, we're only into this just about 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks now, Alice, and we're beginning to see some of the changes in the real estate market in our valleys, and so we're going to talk about that today during our show. But there's still a lot of activity going on out there. We got some great stats to share along with you, along with a great guest. So even though we're here the week after Easter, there's just a lot of activity going on, a lot of things to share with folks. You've been out showing. I showed the first property since the virus started. I know you suit up totally. You're like you go out there with your breathing material, don't you?
My kids made me masks. I have all the stuff in my car. I do entire buyer tours now, virtually or suited up. So it's what we do to keep everybody safe and healthy, including ourselves.
And people are coming around. We're following all the new protocols to make sure that everyone stays safe. But yes, there's a lot of activity going on all across the board in price ranges, which is really kind of surprising to a lot of people. So anyway, we'll talk about that today with our guest, by the way, who's Rick Harris. Rick has been on our show before, Alice. He's a past president of the Oregon Association of Realtors, is one of his many things, but he's also a realtor now with John L Scott. So we're going to talk with him about what his views are, what he's seen in the market, and about how the new normal, what is real estate going to be like when this, as we go forward? Because it's all changed in the last month, hasn't it? It's amazing.
It really has. And we're so lucky to have Rick not only on the show today, to have him at John L Scott. He is he's actually the head of the Rick Harris Real Estate Group, John L Scott Ashland. Breadth of knowledge, breadth of experience, and also very practical minded. So we're really excited to be talking to him today about what the protocols are and how we can all manage to buy and sell property in Southern Oregon through this pandemic. It's going to be good.
Yeah, this last week, for example, Alice had one of the lowest sold rates that we've had. But yet what's so interesting about the market is that the sellers are getting pretty close to their asking price right now.
Well, so it's low inventory still. It's a weird situation.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's why we're so...
Yeah. So the market is always talking, and we're seeing that play out really in both counties right now, or all three counties, to matter of fact. And I still talk to a lot of out-of-state buyers who are still waiting to come out here and look. There's a ton of those out there as well. So it's really the dynamics of real estate is so different right now, and that's really what our show is going to be about today. It's going to be we look forward to it.
It's going to be great, and we'll be back after these messages, and we'll be talking more with Pete Belcastro, Rick Harris, and Alice Lema. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on News Media KCMX Radio 880 AM. I'm Alice Lema here with my buddy Pete Belcastro. We're both brokers at John L Scott, Southern Oregon, and we get to speak today to Rick Harris of the Rick Harris Real Estate Group, John L Scott Ashland. And also wanted to mention that today's show is brought to you by the Oregon Association of Realtors. So thank you so much to them for sponsoring us. Welcome, Rick. How are you doing? How are you doing with all this pandemic?
Hi, Alice. Hey, Pete. I'm doing great. I live on a little ranch in Talent, and so I'm getting to spend a whole lot of time with the horses and the dogs and the cats and the geese and the irrigation equipment. In the meantime, doing real estate every day, trying to be as prepared as I can for buyers and sellers in the market.
Well, and I like the normalcy of what you just said. And it's one of the reasons I was excited about having you on the show today, because in spite of all this, we still have to get our fields ready. We still have to take care of our family. We still have to function. People still have to move. So this will be a great topic for today.
Thank you.
So how are things going with your real estate? How are your buyers and sellers doing with all of this?
Well, so one of the things about my real estate career, been in for 31 years, so I have a broad base. I do a lot of new construction. I do a lot of resale. I do land. I do rural property. And what I'd say in general is people are sort of wondering about the future, about what the steps should be. I carry a fairly large inventory of homes available for sale, and every seller asks me how to be best prepared for people coming to their house. And when buyers are looking, they're asking me what's the best way to stay safe and how to see the properties that they want. So one of the things that I'd say at this point is I've had to learn how to retool my business to be able to deal with people more remotely rather than in person. And that's things like we're doing today. This is happening via Zoom. So Alice is at her house and Pete's at the studio, and I'm stuck in a little room far away. And yet here we all are having this conversation. And this is pretty representative of how I work with buyers and sellers in the marketplace. I have a listing appointment tomorrow to talk to some people in Medford, and they're wondering about how the market should impact them and also how they have to be prepared for buyers coming to their homes. And then working with buyers, this is a great way to have a face-to-face with people, even though they're in their home or far away. So it's an embrace of technology at a time when we really need to do that in order for people to be safe.
We've heard a lot, Rick, about people buying and selling right now because they have a great need to, and not necessarily, some people can put it off for a while, things like that. But people right now that they have a great need. Are you seeing that also in terms of the people that you're dealing with?
Well, I work quite a lot in the Ashland market, rural market, and what I would say is I have kind of a mix there. So I have a mix of people who need to sell and want to. I have a mix of people that need to buy and want to. And so with those, I would say that people that would want to, it's a little slower. People are being a little bit more cautious, a little bit more watching what's going on in the market. On the need side of things, there are certainly those who have the same issues that they always have. I want to move to a new location for a job. I want to have kids in a different school district. I need to upsize my home for my family. I need to downsize my home because now I'm an empty nester. And so all of those situations are still going. People are just learning a different way to make that work in today's market. And what I would say about that is there are still people who need, and we have to find the best way to accommodate their needs in either selling or buying. And that's what we're all learning how to do at this point.
Yeah.
So when a seller calls up, we have a couple of options. If somebody wants to list their house right now and talk to us, have you had anybody request yet for the virtual listing appointment where you're still separate and they're showing you their house on their phone or something like that?
No, not personally. So give you a couple of examples though. So I work with a local builder here that does a lot in our marketplace, and we have a new project that's being brought to market fairly shortly. And we have a team of 8 that work on that. So people who are designers and developers and planners and builders, we meet every Thursday morning just in this format. And one of the cool things about this particular program, I can pop up pictures, I can include a little slideshow if I need to. And so we interact with each other on the same kinds of issues. What's the floor plan looking like? What's the exterior style looking like? Which different lots are we talking about? And so interact in that way with new listings that are coming with that particular builder. It's virtually all online. Have a new listing to send out to him today. That's going to be signed electronically. I've found quite a bit. I would say actually that this has created a greater engagement of people in some ways than we had before. Maybe not so much face to face, but yesterday as an example, I was on this kind of presentation through Zoom for 5 hours with different sets of topics, different sets of buyers, different sets of issues. So it's a platform that makes it much more possible. On the buy side, the real difference has been how can I help people see properties effectively, even though they can't see them in person. So every one of my listings now has a virtual walkthrough where we go through, walk it through on FaceTime. post it to our YouTube channel, be able to provide that in a long format if they want a detailed look, or a short format if they want just a quick overview. And that combined with some of the 360 programs that are out there that allow you to take a virtual tour is really helping buyers be able to see what's possible, even though they can't be there in person. And then secondarily, you know, it's a tool that many of us have used before, but if I have somebody who's quite specific about what they're looking for, I can do a FaceTime. So I have a buyer, lives in Roseburg, couldn't come down for his walkthrough inspection. And so I virtually walked him through both of the units in that investment property live through FaceTime. And he asked questions. We looked at particular things, pointed my camera at him so he could see them. And it made it as close as possible to them being able to walk through themselves. So, you know, we're adapting, but I think we're adapting in a way that makes it work well for people.
Well, and I predict when this is all over that this is the higher standard that agents, realtors are going to be held to anyway, because it serves the client better in a lot of ways. Before they get in their car and go see something, we can do this for them, and it's also at their convenience.
And I'll say, one of the buyers I work with, I sent her a virtual tour. And when we got together by phone to talk about it, she had looked at that multiple times. So it allowed the opportunity to have the first, second, and third showing all at the same time, because they could go back and replay it, see the parts that they missed, focus in on the things that were important to them. And so then when we were able to have a walkthrough showing, she knew that house like the back of her hand. To be able to support.
Yeah, and I think that helps the clients. It helps the seller more too, because then when they're doing a showing, whether we're having a pandemic or not, they're actually getting people that are ready to write an offer on something, and they're not just you know, having the seller leave the house just because they're curious.
I think that's right. I think it does provide people a great opportunity to look things through virtually. Make sure it's the kind of house, the floor plan that would work for them, so that when you have an in-person showing, which is certainly restricted at this point, right? So it's a little harder to get in-person showings, but that way people know much more thoroughly what it is that they're going to go have a look at. And then if it's something of interest to them, then they're much more advanced in what they know about it and are capable of understanding about the property when they go to look at it in person and specifically.
Here's a good question for you. I've been reading where, you know, in the last recession of 2008, housing caused most of that recession because housing lending practices, etc. And this time that's not the case. And I've been reading, Rick, where, and Alice, you too, where economists are saying that housing, with low interest rates the way they are, that housing may be the fuel that gets our economy going again after we start loosening restrictions. And that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that's in our future because of interest rates the way they are?
Well, there are a couple things about that, Pete, and I've read some of those same articles, how this financial and economic difficulty is entirely different than what we had in the recession from real estate, that it's driven by entirely different issues. So for those of you who've been around Oregon for a long time, we had a pretty strong recession, 99 to 2000, and 2000 to 2004. What brought the Oregon economy out of that recession was the real estate marketplace. That is, it led the way in economic activity in the state of Oregon for 4 years and brought us out of that recession. What I would say about this one goes back to really, if you look at the statistics in the marketplace from January to March of this year from the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, what you would see is a strong selling season. We saw price appreciation in the 11% rate. We saw number of days on the market going down. We saw the number of sales going up. We saw the month's supply of inventory going down. That was a boding for a very strong spring market. And then we had the coronavirus that essentially put a clamp on that. So as you had asked earlier, there's the need to sell and the want to sell, the need to buy and the want to buy. And those underlying issues are still there. There are a lot of people still wanting to make their long-term purchase or make that sale and move to a new home or downsize or upsize as the need is. And so my expectation is that the real estate industry will be one of those that leads us out of this recession that's coming. And I think the thing that we all have to do, the other part of what I would say is that between 2008 and today, 2008 was centered a lot around people who owned real estate. And today, this is impacting everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Restaurateur, if you're a small business owner, if you're a large business owner. So everybody is involved in this piece of it. And I think the most important part is as we find our way to gradually come back to a more open environment where we can be out and be with people, that we are going to see a strong market in the real estate arena, because there is that pent up supply of people that want to sell and supply of people that want to buy. And in many regards, it's a little hard to say exactly what that will look like. But as we work our way through this, we have the normal activity that's been put on hold that will release, and then you get people that are ready to reactivate their listing and ready to be out looking. So I think it will help us toward a strong recovery.
So
Okay.
we're gonna
Got a break coming up.
We got a break coming up, so hold that thought. Don't change the channel. We'll be back with Pete Belcastro and Rick Harris in just a moment, so stay tuned. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I am Alice Lema here with my cohort Pete Belcastro and Rick Harris. We're all brokers at John L Scott, Southern Oregon Real Estate. Today we're talking about what's going on in the local market, as well as how we are fending with the coronavirus and helping people still get where they need to go on time and buying and selling their properties safely. So Pete, how are things going with you buying and helping people buy and sell houses?
Well, I've got quite a few out-of-state buyers, and Rick is right with the last segment there about the virtual way we do it now. I've done several, and I actually like the FaceTime walking through for people. It saves them a lot of time, and they can certainly see it and get their perspective if they want to continue it or not. So I see that continuing in the future a whole lot more than maybe we're used to that, especially for people who are not around us. But I want to just get both your opinion on this. I'm just looking right now at the MLS, on SOMLS right now, and on the pending sales. And this is what's so crazy about our market right now. If you look between, remember that $250,000 to $350,000 range is number one in the market kind of place. Well, I just want to tell you how fast these properties have gone pending, okay? So I'm going to say, it starts at 2 days, 2 days, 11 days, 2 days, 17 days, 3 days, 5 days, 4 days, 12 days, 18 days, and 8 days.
So people
That's
are
how
really
fast these properties are going. It's amazing.
They're pulling the trigger quickly. Yep, they're pulling the trigger quickly.
And I looked at pending sales between under 300, just as talk about that. 114 sales pending in the last 30 days in
Wow.
the 300. If you're in the 300 to 500 range, it's 97 pending sales in that. Above 500, it drops off quite significantly. And here's more, I think, that goes with what Alice was talking about with a low inventory. So under 300,000 countywide, Jackson County-wide, 1.3 month supply. That is, if you sold everything on the market, it would take you 1.3 months to do that, less than 45 days. If you're between 300 and 500, about a 3-month supply. And then above 500, it's significantly higher than that. But I think what that indicates is that goes to that underlying need to sell, to buy, that there is that continuing in the marketplace, despite the fact that we're learning to work in a different way, that buyers and sellers are learning to market or view properties in a different way. There still is that underlying energy in the marketplace. And we have to be ready for the fact that once we're able to be out and about a bit more, there's likely to be quite a bit more activity as people are.
Hey, Rick, what should buyers and sellers be kind of aware of regarding the other parts of our partnerships in terms of real estate? I'm talking about with the lenders and with the title companies, because I mean, look how we're talking about how it's affected what we're doing, and I know it's affected them. So how should we prepare buyers and sellers, or what should they think about now with this?
So if you're out shopping for a mortgage, number one, get to a good mortgage broker that you like. And a realtor can identify 8 or 10 different people that you can interview. So have a good conversation about what to expect. What I would say about it is we're at 50-year lows in the mortgage rate. 30-year fixed rate mortgage today is between 3.5 and 3.625% interest. And if you're at a 15-year fixed, that's at about 3.25. I would also say, though, in that same really strong price range, one of the things to know is that government-backed loans, FHA, VA, USDA, those are a lot harder because they're having to make sure that you've got the income and that you've got the ongoing job to make that piece work. So have a good conversation with your lender as you're getting ready for either a purchase or a refinance. On the title side, really quite interestingly, all of us as active brokers know that one of the most important days in a real estate transaction is when you go to closing. And you go to the title company and you sit at the table and the papers are being passed back and forth. Well, that is a significantly different environment today than it used to be. So the title companies, escrow companies in the Valley, quite concerned about public safety. And so they're limiting the number of people that can be in a closing, and generally only those who are there to sign, along with the signing officer. Before you enter a signing room, that is re-sanitized after each and every use of that closing room. I just was selling a property that I own, and my wife and I were in on Monday to close it. And we were in with a notary to sign documents, and they have a little protective screen, and they have, but before we could go in, they spent 5 or 8 minutes re-sanitizing that room. The documents were ones that I had asked to see the day before so that I would be prepared for that. So the time involved in the signing was shorter for everybody. So I had previewed that. And I know for me and buyers that I'm working with, we closed another buyer last week, and she had to go to signing by herself. Normally I would accompany that. My partner Rochelle would accompany. And so what we all did is we got the title company to send us through a secure link all of the closing documents the day before. We could review them. I could talk it through with the buyer about what they were going to be signing. And then when she was there, she was really quite familiar with all of the myriad of documents. And this was a loan package. So she had probably 60 documents to sign. And so it's taking a lot of effort, both on our part as realtors and on the part of the title companies, to be well prepped so that people can do that work effectively.
You know, it's great though. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Rick, do you think, this may be changing the subject here, but do you think when we're showing properties now and Alice goes through, puts masks on, should it just be the buyers now, or what do you tell buyers who say, well, I want my kids to see it, or I want my this to see it? What do you tell people?
No, can't go.
And I think what Alice is onto there is that typically speaking, if somebody's going to come out and show, there's a protocol. And the first step in the protocol is to make sure that nobody's symptomatic or been around somebody symptomatic. So in our company, we use a little brochure or a little survey that just checks some details about whether people have been exposed or not. And then if not, then they're allowed to be able to see the property. We make sure that the properties are wiped down appropriately. All the surfaces are doorknobs, light switches, and so on. I have a showing of a property this afternoon, and what the buyers can expect there is that the agent will have to open the front door, but all the lights will be on, all the doors will be open so that they can walk through effectively. And I think the same property was showed a few days ago, and they had a family of little kids, and I asked them please not to show it to the children, not because we don't want kids in the house, not at all, but what we're concerned about is being able to make sure that surfaces aren't touched that don't need to be touched. And when kids get running around or something, they may be running hands over stuff and so on. So it's just a sense of public safety for everyone.
Well, yeah, and people are very distracted when they're going through a house. And so if you have other relatives or friends and they're not part of the contract, they really should not be there right now. This is not the time to have your friends and family.
And what I would say about that as well, Alice, is that depending upon whether the unit is occupied or vacant makes a big difference in how you can set the protocol. I was talking about this virtual walkthrough I did for a buyer. Well, that was a tenant occupied property, and those tenants wanted to be home, as they rightly should be. And so we had to do some proper safety protocol to be able to make sure that they felt comfortable and we were comfortable, just in terms of wearing gloves and sanitizing hands and washing carefully and wearing.
So I'm curious, did you have the tenants wear masks and gloves too?
I'm always wanting to make sure that people are comfortable themselves. So, there are people who feel absolutely, I'm going to wear a mask or not. There are others who don't. And so you want to make sure, in my opinion, that you allow people's own sense of comfort to dictate. So if you're taking a new listing today, or if you've got a seller occupied house, first question you have to ask your seller, what will make you comfortable? What will make you comfortable in terms of having people in the house? It's better if you're not home, so that you don't have to worry about that piece. Personally, I like to accompany showings, not to sort of control the buyer and seller, but absolutely to be there to assist in making sure that things are wiped down properly, that lights are on properly. So start with what the seller's comfortable with there. And then same conversation with the buyer. You're going into a new environment. What are you comfortable with? I think we do have to speak to our clients about the comfort level, both for themselves and then what we personally have as a comfort level, to make sure that we're thinking about the other person. As I like to say, what's fair to me is not what I think, it's what you think. So how to be fair to you is I've got to ask you what you need me to be doing safety-wise to make you feel comfortable.
Yes, and please don't bring your pets. That's the other thing. We don't want any pets during our showings.
I would say that's the case.
We all agree with that, right, guys?
Kids and pets.
Like to bring your pet boa constrictor, that's a different thing.
It'll be really curious to see how many, we watch every month when the SOMLS stats come out, regarding how many lock boxes are open. And I'm going to flip this over here about how many lock boxes are open. And I'm really curious what that's going to be like, Rick and Alice, as we go through now each week. It looked like it was getting less and less. I'm wondering what that's going to be like now when we're here mid-April. But I think those who are opening boxes are really serious buyers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that that's true. And I think, like any statistic, you have to be mindful of the fact that on my own, I've been out to listings that I have, vacant houses. I've been in and out of them 6 or 8 times. That's not really a showing, but that's a lockbox. So, but more importantly, I think the conversation like this, the conversation between brokerages, between buyers and their agent, between sellers and their agent, really important. What are you seeing in the marketplace? What are you hearing in the marketplace? Just yesterday, I was at a Southern Oregon Multiple Listing Service meeting. I serve on the board. And one of the things was, how can we have the real estate tour when we can't be together? That is, we canceled doing weekly caravan meetings about 4 weeks ago. So the decision was made beginning tomorrow for the Ashland tour, and I think the following week for the Medford tour, to allow a virtual environment like this, where 30, 40 people come together in a Zoom call, and they talk to each other about what's going on in the marketplace. And the value of that is then you hear the broad perspective from a lot of companies, from a lot of agents, sharing that information together. And in that regard, less so which houses you're looking at, more so the ability to talk about what the broad perspective is about the market.
Mm-hmm.
You're really
Mm-hmm.
right. And John L Scott's going to do a virtual tour, the same thing, I think on the 19th this month too. So it's all out there, Alice. It's all virtual,
Yeah,
new
and
world, our new
and
real estate world.
this is
We
a
got a break
really
coming up here.
we do, and we're going to talk more about why we want to use realtors in these situations, because we do talk to each other. And we'll be back momentarily with Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema, and Rick Harris from John L Scott. Talk to you in a minute. Don't go away. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, and I'm here with Pete Belcastro and Rick Harris. We're all brokers at John L Scott, Southern Oregon. We're here talking about what's going on in our little valley, real estate-wise, and our show is brought to you by the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. We thank them very much for sponsoring us. And Pete and Rick, let's talk a little bit about some of the other side effects of the corona pandemic. We've got issues with forbearance. We've got rental tenant situations. Let's talk about that.
There's a lot of programs now out there, a lot of things out there right now that people can take advantage of, that the government has put out there, or other even private businesses have, regarding your mortgage rates and rents. We're reading all sorts of things about it, and you have a lot of landlords, Alice. Or what are they seeing? That kind of. What are they seeing?
Well,
are rents being paid, or are people pushing up their mortgages? What's that going to do to the mortgage rates? Whatever. I don't know.
And I think nationally we had a 31%. 31% of the tenants did not pay their rent. However, it was more about proactivity in my mind. And I heard this from Danielle Remley at Sterling West Property Management as well, is that for those of us that got on the phone and talked to the landlords ahead of time and got them to talk to the tenants and just get everybody on the same page. And if the tenants were really having an issue because they had been laid off or furloughed, then arrangements could be made. But also to explain to them that it was not a free-for-all. This does not mean you just don't pay your rent, right, Rick?
Well, and I think that's an important distinction for people. So what people heard announced was a non-eviction period. And so couldn't evict tenants for non-payment of rent, and rightly so. No one should be out of their house in a pandemic. The challenge with it is that got confused to be, I don't have to pay my rent.
Right, exactly.
And that's correct. All that's happening there is if you get behind, if you're not able to make your payment, then you can't be evicted for that. Well, so what's the real solution? The real solution is to call and talk to your landlord, because all of us are in the same boat together. And what I would say is you hear this all across the country about that relationship between landlord and tenant is an ongoing one, and everybody wants to preserve that relationship. If you're having difficulty, if you're unemployed at the moment, if you're furloughed for the appointment, talk to your landlord about it. Make sure that you understand what their expectation and what yours is. And so the fact of the matter is that rent is still owed, it's just delayed. And the bottom line about it is when you delay things, then there is the reckoning day later on. And that goes with the other side of this on the mortgage side. So many of us who own our home have a mortgage. I do. Refinanced my house this spring. And I've got monthly payments to make. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the secondary market lenders, identified that there can be forbearance. That is a 90-day period in which you do not have to pay your mortgage. Now, that doesn't mean that your mortgage isn't owed. It simply means that you cannot start foreclosure proceedings because somebody is late on their mortgage payment. And once again, the key issue here is, are you talking to your lender? So I'm in a fortunate position. I pay my mortgage monthly and I'm able to, but many people are not. And so this is a short time out, but here's the underlying issue. If you take advantage of the 90-day forbearance, at the end of that 90-day period, all 90 days worth of payment are due.
And that's what people don't realize.
Why would anybody want to do that?
Well, they wouldn't if they couldn't. So if you're capable of making your mortgage payment, please do. It's better in the long run. If you find yourself in a situation where you're not able to pay your mortgage, first call you make is to your lender. Make sure that you're understanding how they're applying the forbearance rules. Are they going to add that payment to the end of the mortgage? Are they going to require it to be done up front? I will tell you, if you don't talk to them, they will treat it as though it's owed at the end of the 90-day period. So have that conversation. Make sure that it's clear. Take great notes while you're talking to your lender, but don't believe that forbearance is forgiveness. It's not. What it is a delay, and you need to, as a mortgage holder, understand the terms of the delay. And
Yes,
to do
yeah,
that
and
at
if you
the
have
end
a
of 90
bank account,
days.
and if you have a bank, one of the nice things that the banks are doing right now is that on their home pages, they have COVID-19 areas where you can go to specifically find that information out. And they do vary. You're absolutely right, Rick. They vary, because I've seen one from US Bank, for example, with a mortgage where it's 6 months and it basically stops for 6 months. There's no penalties, no fees, and it picks up in 6 months. So each of these banks, each of these lenders have a different program, but you want to check them out. But they're all out there if you need them.
And I believe that's right, Pete. I think everybody is dealing with the same crisis. And what you don't want to do is ignore the information sources that are out there. And one of the things about the mortgage market is who you generate your loan with is not always who your loan is paid.
That's a good point.
And so I just did a mortgage through a local mortgage company, but now Wells Fargo holds my loan, and that's perfectly fine. So my lender here is ultimately Wells Fargo, even though I had a local mortgage broker put that loan together for me. And so as a consumer, you want to make sure, look at who your payments are going to, make sure you go to your website there. Almost every mortgage payment I know gives you the website of your lender. Go to it, look for that COVID-19 information, figure it out, but do not depend just on what's said there. Do call and actually record a conversation with the lender, understanding, being able to ask questions so that you can get the most accurate information about that.
Hey, Rick, we're almost out of time, but before we let you go, I want to ask you, what do you think is going to happen through the next month here in the real estate market? You're going to be if you can put that thing on your head, what do you think is going to go on?
Well, what I would say is the things that I've read most recently is everybody's trying to figure out the exit strategy. How do we open back up here? Now, what I understand is the president would like that to be the 1st of May. There are other people that would like that to be later. You've got governors in one way, you've got so on. So what's going to happen? If I had that crystal ball, Pete, I would be happy to share it with everyone. What I believe is that we all are going to have to pull together to bring ourselves out of this economic disaster. Now, we've done that in terms of having trillions of dollars of tax relief, which is all on us to pay for at some point. We've done that through trying to use local businesses. So I don't know about you, but I pick up delivery a couple of nights a week, specifically for trying to keep restaurants that I like going. And recognize that economics is a local issue. And so you want to be supportive of those businesses locally as they're finding their way through and coming out of this piece, and recognize that all of us have been impacted. And so it's going to take all of us to look at that solution. This is a great time. I read this once and I didn't write it, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but that we don't need social distancing. What we need is physical distancing and even greater social engagement. And that's what I think we're all learning to do. We're learning how to be physically distanced, but socially engaged. And that's really important for us as we're finding our way out in the next month or 2 or 3 to get this economy restarted. It's going to take all of us working together, and that takes greater social engagement, even though we have to be physically distanced.
And that is so true. So great words to end our show with. That's really great.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much, Rick Harris and Pete Belcastro. We'll see you next week at 10 o'clock on Saturday at KCMX News Radio 880. Have a beautiful week, and thank you for joining us. Bye now.
Bye-bye.